Why don't you kick off?
Why don't you stop looking at your phone since we're doing a show?
I got obsessed with Karen Young pictures.
Oh, God. You can't.
I'm ready.
I need you to show up for
I'm ready.
The task at hand.
I'm here.
You're the one who pushed me to try to keep... You can't pick off lint on the mic while we're live.
Are we live right now? All right, I'm ready.
I renegade through and through. I renegade through and through. Oh, Lord, if you only knew. Now tell me, what do I do? And if what I say is true, how could I get through to you? I don't know how to behave. I don't know how to behave. And if I don't change my ways, it might send me to my grave. But if what I say is bad, maybe we could all be saved. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Outlaw's Evidence of the Unseen, exceptional stories and conversations that weave history, religion, arts, and politics into the fabric of our greater cultural narrative.
For this first episode, is that what these are?
Yeah,
episodes?
They're episodes.
We just wanted to have a conversation and share a little bit about who we are, where we're coming from, the way we view the world in a really general kind of way, and start the conversation there.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoy getting to know who we are and just hearing what our story is and what this whole shindig is going to be about. So let's see. Shall we introduce ourselves?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I am Ray Curenton. I'm a recording artist, singer-songwriter, producer.
I'm Tim Dillinger, sometimes recording artist, historian, storyteller, recovering Christian.
So let's start with, why are we doing the show? You kick us off.
We're doing this podcast because Ray and I have been slightly isolated for a number of years just because...
And not just because of the pandemic.
No. School, relocation, getting married at a time it wasn't legal in the state that we lived in at the time, so we relocated to be able to do that. And then just the course of, having ultimately 5 different residences over the course of 5 years really kept us in our own little bubble, which was wonderful in many ways because it really helped us hone in on what our belief system was in that particular moment. And so in coming back to Nashville in 2019, we found a city that had deeply changed and a larger world that had changed, I think, a little bit more than we realized because we were really out of our element in the years that we were on the East Coast. And so in that, we've been saying, where are our people? And
yeah,
going into certain environments and recognizing we didn't have the commonality we once had in those environments, or the commonalities that we did have really ended at a particular hard point. And so we wanted to start talking about, what we believe and finding the people who feel similarly so that we could generate conversation.
Yeah.
And so, why don't you talk about that?
Well, I think, in addition to being an artist, like you said, I think both of us are very interested in history and looking back. It's something that's only amplified in our time together, just watching you and learning all the things that I don't know in my 20s has also been very fascinating. And so when I think about re-entering the world of music, thinking about finding our people, finding our community, I do feel like there is maybe some opportunity for us to do some exploration on our own, and in addition to just kind of sharing what we do know or what we have learned in our process and what we are continuing to learn in our process, and do some work to tell some stories from some different perspectives. When we put together our list of topics that we may want to cover, I think a lot of stories that we wrote down are things that are maybe misremembered on purpose. And I think the lens that we are both coming from, as queer people, as feminist people, as people that are having these conversations all the time, I think every time we talk, I am illuminated, and maybe that's really egotistical of me to say, but I would hope that other people would be illuminated by them as well. And I do know, again, this is also going to sound really egotistical, but I know that people who have had conversations with us around these things have suggested that we do something like this repeatedly over the years. And so in trying to figure out what that might look like or what that might be, I think this can kind of be a way for us to have the kinds of conversations that we don't get to have. Because we're not leaving the house, and we weren't leaving the house before the pandemic, but we're not. We're not leaving the house, and I think there are people that we would like to reach, people that we would like to foster community with, but probably wouldn't be able to find were it not for the internet. So this is definitely, hopefully, an outlet for that.
Well, yeah, and I feel like for me the other reason is that I am often not illuminated by a lot of the conversations that I see online, and I've really shied away from Twitter and Facebook and those kinds of conversations.
Well, it's hard to have conversations now at this point. Not that it was ever maybe easy, but I feel like the opportunity for having the right conversations on social media, that's so over now. It's so over. You can't do it on Facebook. Twitter's just a cesspool of just people being antagonistic on purpose, and so trying to do this kind of knowledge sharing and having good faith conversations with people where we're both coming in and knowing we're probably going to disagree on things, but not immediately being just nasty,
Well, the snark. I have a hard time with the snark. In fact, something really silly happened on Twitter a few weeks ago, and I was this is why I don't have these conversations. It was about an Aretha Franklin record, and somebody said, why would that be your favorite album? And I went, wow, that's the way we're starting this conversation. I'm not going any further because do you want to talk about it?
Right.
I get it. You don't like it. Do we need to say more?
Yeah.
And so there's that to me, and it's just an example of something silly.
Well, right. But no, if you can't even have a conversation about something silly, how are we going to dismantle toxic institutions in the church or problematic understandings of evangelicals or whatever?
Complex personalities.
Yeah.
And that's, I think for me, I find that people either land in I shouldn't say people land in, people make, the assessment is either they're wonderful or they're trash, and there's no in between. And I'm more interested in a much more complex picture because people are people and things are often more complex than they're trash.
Yeah.
And so, context and history and experiences and what things may mean at a particular time may not mean what they mean in 2021. And so I feel like having the space to have that kind of conversation with tone where you're hearing voice and it's not just like capital words or, like all of the things that get inferred through the ways we communicate now that clearly don't work.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it all plays a part in why we wanted to do this.
Yeah. Well, shall we talk about who we are?
Sure. Why don't you start?
Oh God. Well, what does that mean? What does who I am mean?
Well, talk a little bit about the framework you grew up in,
all right,
and how that changed as you reached adulthood. And I think that gives a nice idea of how you landed in the particular positionality that you're in now.
All right. I'll try to be brief because I also know that yours is much more complex.
I'll be brief.
Interesting. Well, yours is more interesting, I think. I don't know. But okay. Grew up non-denominational, 2-parent household, the youngest child of 3, mother singing in the church, as a praise and worship leader. That was already a thing. And so witnessed her, earliest memories in church of her also being on stage every Sunday or, at any church program having to do an A and B selection or something like that. Watch my sister also follow in those footsteps and be a member of, at that point it was the teen praise team. And my brother as well for a period, and just grew up in a singing household. Grew up in a also fairly conservative for Black, Christian household. So my parents purposefully did not have cable television because they did not want us influenced by, the things that would be on cable television. And there were a number of other things. I mean, I remember having to turn the channel to a different program if there were one too many curse words. Things like that, constantly monitoring the media we were taking in. I had gospel only in the house, Christian music only in the house. So, and of course, having a brother and sister my brother's 8 years older than me. My sister is 5 years older than him. Things trickled in, of course, as they became teenagers. And, so there was still an understanding of pop culture, Black pop culture that I still got, even if it was filtered. But yeah, and so that was my framework, and church every Sunday. Eventually when I became a teenager, ended up in the teen choir. We moved to a different church at that point. And got my taste, I guess, of being that visible, I guess. And not that I wasn't, because I feel like our family was always somewhat visible wherever we were in a church, because the package deal was, we were always going to find our way doing music at some point, doing music in ministry at some point. But it was my first experience being that person, not just witnessing it through my mother or my sister. And yeah, I guess at that point, a few years into that, started realizing, I might be gay or something, and not really wanting to deal with that. And also being a student that just in school, being a smart kid. And so recognizing that my trajectory was going to be academic on some level, I know I was going to go to college, and recognizing just coming up against intellectual ceilings, as well as knowing that my identity, or just who I was at some point, was possibly going to be a problem in that space. And at varying levels of consciousness, because I think at times I was really naive and thought, I could navigate those things and it would be fine and I wouldn't have to face anything. But still, I think subconsciously making decisions to pull back, become a little bit less visible, and I think subconsciously something about me knew at some point I'm going to be making decisions, and those are going to be you know, I'm not really going to be able to maneuver in this space of the church in the same way. I think subconsciously I always knew that. Was always interested, though, in social justice on some level. I always liked the view that I did get of Jesus every now and then. It wasn't all the time, but the view of him as a social justice icon who cared for the poor, who was, you know, doing the work of trying to heal the land, and that service mindset of Christianity, which you don't get a lot. Now you get a lot of prosperity and power seeking. And that's the side of it that I never really was drawn to. I was always drawn to the shepherding and the going out and laying hands or just giving money to more people, figuring out how to make people's conditions better. And so as I became a budding songwriter and knew I wanted music to be a part of my life, I knew that would be a huge piece of what my subject matter would be as an artist. And again, school, learning about things like evolution and having to reconcile those things, learning about feminism just from a sociological standpoint, learning things and not really seeing them necessarily as incongruent. I mean, evolution I did see as incongruent with my faith and realized, oh, that doesn't have to be. But some other things that I was picking up on, I didn't necessarily see as taking me further and further on the fringe. And before I knew it, I was kind of there. And also going, and I think it's okay to be gay or bi or whatever I might be. And so stepping out into that and finding, hey, there are Christians that do hold different views and hold different values that help propel me forward. And then discovering social media communities on Twitter and Tumblr and learning critical race theory for the first time, which is kind of wild to say, but up until 19 years old, I hadn't had race and racism and white supremacy framed to me as a black person in that way, because the church was always, prejudice and racism, were the same thing. And so black people can be racist and, all those things. And so that was informing also my politic, in addition to finding a feminist understanding of those things and seeing how all those things can intersect with my understanding of, okay, now I'm going to be navigating the world as a queer man, and what privileges might I have, so all of those things were also working on me as I was maintaining this faith that I had, and slowly but surely realized, well, honestly, at that point, I knew I wasn't interested in being, in sitting within those four walls every Sunday. At that point, I realized there really wasn't much I was going to be getting from being in those spaces, just in terms of knowledge or scholarship or anything like that. I was clear, I can do that work for myself. That's fine. And also at that point, the community aspect of church for me had been so lost, because we had moved to different churches and tried to, help upstarting churches. And so just that connectivity from, year to year to year, having church friends that you have these really strong ties with, those were already kind of not there anymore, or not as strong as they were, because I was 2 or 3 churches removed from certain friendships at that point. And so even that community thing that kind of keeps people in that space, because, that's where their entire friend group is, I didn't really have that anymore. I was going to college out of state. I was had different friend groups in high school and different friend groups in college, and different, was again, like finding people online that I went, oh wow, and they're having conversations I'd love to have that I'm not having any other place. And so it was easy for me to just go, yeah, I don't need that anymore. And let's see, am I leaving anything out? Is that a good base for who I am?
Well, and I think just saying, that I think it's important to say that you went to a Christian-oriented college.
Yes. Oh, and I went to a Christian school. Lord, I went to a Christian elementary school. I did go to public middle school and high school, but I was also in a Christian elementary school, which was also fundamental. And going to Belmont University, going to a Christian college, that was totally accidental, but had its own challenges as well, because as I was coming to a greater understanding of my racial identity, on top of my sexual identity, on top of my feminist identity, feminist ally, identity, however you want to place me in that, I was realizing that even in navigating that college space, that campus space, to better my prospects for leaving that campus, I was recognizing that I was bumping up against very clear, you got to buy into this to access this. And if you aren't going to buy in, then you're not going to access. And so, I probably could have had a very different trajectory in college had I not been out at that point, had I, been willing to be a little bit more tokenized as that
and
Black
we'll be
person on
talking
campus.
about what that means in many of our conversations, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I witnessed people who had my skin color, who weren't out at the time, have some different access. They opted in, and it got them certain things. But I also witnessed those same people have to make decisions at certain point and come and own their truth later. And I'm not fully sure what's the better option. I just know I did what I needed to do at the time to be whole and well for me then. And I don't regret that. So, yeah.
It's been a journey. So, my background, I grew up in a white evangelical preacher's family. My mother, this is important for context, my mother was divorced while she was pregnant with me, and in 1975, that was scandalous. And so I was, born into, I was already an outsider at birth. That was considered a bastard child, back then. And so that was how I entered fundamentalism, which is quite an interesting vantage point to start from. And so as I was, I was there with them, with my grandparents and my mother, until I was 14, 15. And then I was dropped into a Black fire-baptized holiness church, which was a breath of fresh air in many ways, and also revolutionary for me in the standpoint that it enlightened me about all of the things that were wrong with where I came from that I didn't have words for. And it also provoked all of the things that were wrong. So my movement over there brought out things from my family, their racism, in a really tremendous way, and forced me to make some really strong decisions early on about where I stood. And so I ended up in the holiness church for a decade after that. And that really shaped me. I got, that we're talking the 90s ultimately. And everything that I am today really came from that, largely. The heartbeat of it came from that experience. we were also, I'm born the bastard child, and then I land in a holiness church that I did not know was considered the loose church. We were jokingly in our community called the loose church, and we had just such a wonderful assortment of people. We had former Panthers who were ministers there. We had just everybody. We had educators. We had hairdressers. We had just, there were everybody was closeted and whatever they did. We had, women who weren't married that had boyfriends at home. We had, all the things that were taboo. Everybody pretty much was accepted. And that was my bubble. And so you don't know that it's that extraordinary because it's normal to you. And I felt as I got older and was, I was really detached from my sexuality and the physicality of it, but I was also very aware that I was attracted to men and didn't know what to do with it. Because I was, also a sexual trauma survivor, so I had a lot of fear around sexuality. And our pastor's daughter had started her own church. And towards the end of that decade that I'd been at New Covenant, I saw our pastor's daughter at her church, and she had gay men there. And I thought, I'd like to be somewhere where people are a little more, I thought, open. And so I made a transition over there, and it was a clusterfuck. Ultimately, it was just a clusterfuck.
Yeah.
And I don't think I made it 3 years. And I realized that she was marrying off the gay men, and they were still gay, And when I say this wasn't even about bisexuality. These were gay men who were marrying in a sense of, it wasn't even reparative therapy. It was passibility.
Yeah. Repression. Just, yeah.
Yeah, but not repression, because they weren't repressing anything. They were just marrying for the sake of appearance.
Yeah.
And so I just went, this isn't going to work for me. And I had a lot of stuff around it because I was still really unresolved about a lot, clear about who I was, but unresolved. But it also knew I didn't want to do that. Like I just went, this doesn't work. I don't want to support this or be a part of this. And so I moved to Nashville at 24 and thought I was wanted to still be a gospel artist. That's what all my life I wanted to do. I wanted to be a gospel artist, CCM artist, something that merged the two. That was always my vision. And got to Nashville, and to condense a long chapter in a sense, sailing through two churches, one white, one black, I realized, oh my God, where I came from was really unique. And it is not replicated anywhere.
Yeah.
And also did not know the larger world had changed. And so while where I came from was exceptional, and I probably would not find that anywhere else in the world had also changed. And so just the even basic framework of the worship style I'd come from was already shifting into not even contemporary gospel, but praise and worship.
Yeah.
And this is 2001. Mm-hmm. And so after about 2 years...
Oh, so you had escaped the praise and worship through the 90s.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
That wasn't even... Okay.
No, we were still... Even at my pastor's daughter's church, we were doing Whitfield and, doing Thomas Whitfield things with hymns and just, it wasn't that.
Yeah. And it was over. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. And so when I came here, I was just like, what in the world is going on?
Culture shock.
And,
sorry, I'm just picturing it.
I didn't even make it 3 years between the two churches.
I bet.
And I was, at that point, working on my first record, which I had already decided was going to be an R&B record, because the last church experience was so traumatic. I just said, oh no, I can't do this with these people. it was just like the beginning of like putting time limits on praise and worship, which I'd also never heard of. I wasn't aware that that was a thing. Like they had a big like football stadium clock in the back of the church that counted down your 15 minutes. And I was like, 15 minutes? That's like a song and a half. What do you mean? And so,
yeah.
And just there were a lot of politics, and we didn't have politics at either church in Florida. Like, thankfully, on that level, we all liked each other, and there was never power. It was a kind of a come one, come all kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I got to Nashville, and it was just, who gets the microphone that's turned on? You're too close to the minister of music. Are you trying to take my place? Like, weird church shit that I had never had to experience ever. And so I'm 24. I'm too old for this. I don't want to do this. And so I just made a decision. I'm just going to leave. And I started studying like Buddhism and reading about other faiths and just recognizing the interconnectedness of it all. And which put me very much outside. So I talked to my church friends. They'd say, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm studying about Buddhism." And they're like, "Oh,
yeah.
In the South, you may as well just, have vampire teeth." And so I found myself very isolated because I was reading too much. I was thinking too much. I was taking too much apart. And then, within 3 or so years of that, 4 years of that, and I might be messing up my timeline here, I was coming out.
Yeah, yeah. And I will add to my story that I wasn't looking at other faiths, but at that point, like in, late teens, early adulthood, I was already at the place where I wasn't interested in converting other people.
Yeah.
I was fine with meeting atheists and agnostics where they were at and not trying to get into debates about, the most absolute faith, and I just was so over that at that point too. And so I think that was another thing that kind of made it easy for me to not need to be in the world in that kind of way. Go ahead.
Yeah, and and that's the thing. I think even from my youngest days at my grandparents' church, I was never a fundamentalist. And so, having, my whole world in Florida, I'm kind of going back a minute, was Christian. I mean, everything I did was church. I worked in a Christian bookstore. I was, everything I did. And then I thankfully got a job at a non-Christian corporation. I made my first gay friend, like real, like out in the world gay friend there. I, was able to have people that had no idea what Christianity was connected to me, and it really started to put Christianity and the church in a context for me that I had just always assumed was the norm for everybody. And so to understand some people had no relationship with it, some people just didn't give a shit about it, just freed me up to think differently. And so by the time I was navigating through all the crap in Nashville and the churches, my tolerance was already like at an all-time low.
Yeah.
And so I really did filter through the two perfect places to just cut the cord for me completely. And so since that time, coming out was life-wrecking because I was by that time a semi-popular singer in the city and was, selling out small venues and standing room only. And again, this was 2005.
Yeah, people weren't really doing that.
People weren't doing that. And it wrecked me. And I ended up, my last year here, I was delivering commissary to inmates. It was my job. I went from doing music to doing that in a year. And I don't say that with any kind of, now, I don't say that with any kind of regret, because what I recognized was the conditional nature of the public.
Yeah.
And so I always wanted to be a free agent. I always wanted to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. And so that was the price I paid for doing that.
Yeah.
And it's just what it was. And I moved to New York. And I don't need to go through that whole thing, but, it took me through a series of faith experiences. I lived on a pagan commune for a while. I worked for an interfaith book publisher. I just had all of these different experiences, but always had the piece of me that was going right back to New Covenant Holiness Church in terms of where my heart was. And so the last decade and the 7 years of our marriage have really been about integrating what the things that were great about New Covenant, which ultimately to me is my idea of Pentecostal humanism. That the ecstasy we experienced together didn't have anything to do with any force outside of ourselves. We generated that together because, two or three touching and agreeing has nothing to do with an external agent. It has to do with our collective energies converging and producing that. And I've been in pursuit of that, really in this last decade. And I've been doing that through historical work related to people who share that sameness in gospel music, and really trying to reconcile my gospel life with where I am today, and realizing they're not that far apart.
Yeah. And same, I think, I wrote a blog post in 2011 while I was still at Belmont, having had my big reckoning with you don't get to be in this world and navigate in this space while also holding these views and being this way. And just said, I'm done. I was done with trying to navigate gospel music as an outlet for me, done navigating even like identity as a Christian publicly. And yeah, the whole 2010s was figuring out then what that meant in terms of what my music would sound like, and also who my audience was, because you and I both have never really been able to fully divorce our sound, our subject matter from having some spiritual undertone to it, and so figuring out then where that audience is, if it's outside of the church, how you get people to be interested in a spirituality if they don't have any. And if it's folks in the church, how you get them to not be afraid of all the other things you're bringing to them, when it comes to, being political or being, embodying all of the scary, witchcrafty, whatever things you might put on things that are outside of their framework.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I think a lot of the subject matter we're going to be covering. I really don't, even though I'm sure the people we're actually going to be discussing would feel very distant from who we are. I see them as very related to who we are, and complex, and not always the same, but there is a sameness. And I know our first topic is going to be Juanita Bynum, and I'm really excited about that.
Absolutely.
But I feel like, when I see her, I see a part of me. I see a part of where I come from in her, and I understand what she does.
And I know our thoughts are not unique thoughts. I know our experiences are not unique experiences.
No.
Like we have, the difference is we've taken those things, and for whatever circumstances have also been, the skeleton of our existence, like we've just chosen to navigate them differently or have a different response or make a different decision for ourselves. If a few things were different, I think we both thought, like, were we not gay? Were we not this? Were we not that? Would we probably still be wading in the muck of what it is today? Maybe with enough things different.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have any doubt, because I think one of the important things I know we'll also be raising as we have these conversations is I think we could have stayed, but I would argue that we'd be having many of the same mental and emotional struggles.
Absolutely, and that's what my point. Yeah,
we see many of the people that we both grew up watching in that world now navigating in their 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful that we both chose, as our friend Elizabeth Cunningham writes about, the stony path. It is complex. It is painful. It is not the easy path. It is not the economically sane path, but it is the honest path.
And it's also like getting out of the burning building while you still can, I think.
Yeah.
I think.
Many of our friends, we'll say it like that, we have these conversations all of the time because many of our friends are still in that world. And to hear them say in their own individual ways, I'm paraphrasing in my own words, but ultimately, to hear them say, good Lord, I hate the music. The people's politics are abhorrent. The expectations of particularly singers and musicians are ridiculous. The pay grade for the labor they are doing is also, not
fair,
especially in connection with, or in connection with what pastors make.
Yeah.
But they keep going. And part of that, I think, is because, what the church world does not do, which both of us had also a very different experience. The church does not largely prepare people to do other things in the world other than do church.
No.
And so I was, on that level, I was lucky to have a mother who, while she was deeply committed in her own ways, was a librarian and dabbled in radical feminism.
Yeah.
So I had, again, another little light providing a different way. And I know you were encouraged in your studies, even just because you were so good in school.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, at that point, it's such an interesting teeter-totter, I think, especially with the Black church, because it's like, on one hand, Black excellence, like, do it, go to school, like, there's such an encouraging of education and the pursuit of that, but on the other hand, there is still an anti-intellectualism that's in the church, period, and is just a part of the Black church, by proxy. And so it's like, yeah, we want you to go to school, but we don't want you to then tell us about ourselves after you've learned about, learned a little bit more and gotten into the world a little bit more. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think, just an example for people that anybody can access. I mean, the Iyanla Van Zant episode with the Pace sisters, where the one sister talked about wanting to go to college and ultimately being shamed out of staying in college. I mean, I think those stories are very common. Again, being from the loose church, I didn't personally see that experience happening for people. We had people that were graduating from college all the time.
Well, and there's a difference between going to school for like business or to get like, doctors and lawyers. Like, that's what they also think when they're thinking about like college and, going to have a career. But, the liberal arts piece of it, the, learning sociology, psychology, social work, like all these other aspects that are going to teach you, and on that level, religion, like, unless you're going to go to a Bible college, that's going to frame it in a specific,
Nobody was going to a non-Christian divinity school.
Yeah.
So, all that to say, I think that, the struggles that our friends have really are related to having also grown up in a very different world, but having to navigate with the pieces of the church for all the things that have changed. They're also having to navigate with all of the things that are exactly the same.
Yeah.
Ideologically.
Absolutely.
And, another generation that has a completely different relationship with sexual identity, with gender identity, with gender roles, women's place in the world, And so I think there's always a tension for younger people trying to be there today. I'm thrilled to see so many people who have exited and are doing incredible novels. And I mean, this year I've read 3, I think New York Times bestselling novels by people that have escaped the church. And they're all about it.
Yeah.
The fictional work, they're putting it in the fiction and really telling the story in a way that, to me, validates our experience.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We touched a little bit on being from different generations and what that's looked like. I mean, you grew up, 80s, early 90s was your coming of age. For me, it was late 90s, 2000, the first decade of the 2000s. Do we want to talk a little bit about those perspective differences and how that's going to shape the nature of the show and the conversations?
Yeah. I mean, I think that our generational difference, we fill in a lot of years because of that. But, 70, I was born in 75. So, 85 to 93, 94 were really I know who I'm becoming, I think, years that shaped me. But I also had the benefit of being with old people, even when I shifted over to the Holiness Church, all of my heroes were 45 and up. All the people that took time with me and really, not to use church people language, but poured a lot into me and shared a lot with me, were 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so I feel like I got, 3 or 4 generations worth of information and perspectives. And they were the people I wanted to be like. I wanted to be like the old people because they were just so unimpressed with any of it. And that discriminating eye, that's it. Ain't so wonderful. You
Yeah.
like that? Why? And really, those are the questions, to me, I feel like I still show up and ask, so when a lot of times you'll point me to something and be like, why? So just for anything, to force all of us to know why we're looking at what we're looking at and why we're taking it in. And so to me, that's, I'm really clear because I had those whys asked to me all of those years about why I'm drawn, not even why I'm drawn to what I'm drawn to here to read and to talk about, because I was forced to have language around that. And so I feel like now people really don't articulate the why, and nobody really interrogates some of the reasons that are given when people respond to that, because I think it also has to be chiseled down more. I think pushing people to find that. And so that's really what I think I bring, being from my particular generation. I feel like I bring that to the conversation because it's how I'm approaching it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I'm coming into this as just someone who is curious because, a lot of the things that I think we're talking about, either they were over by the time I was, cognizant of sound and light and memory, or they were things that we were just already in the thick of, and I had no context for how we got there. And so if that's like gospel music, it's like, choirs were still making popular songs on the radio, but then I watched that like go away, and then the same thing with like quartets. Like that was a thing that was, like there was still a presence on radio, still a presence on gospel award shows, still a presence, in the gospel mainstream culture. And slowly but surely every year watched award categories being taken out from the Grammys. Remember when there was a gospel choir award, Grammy? It was just all about, nominating choirs. Doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And so, but, that, isn't just specific to gospel music. I mean, like politics. I was born in the thick of, well, coming into, again, like memory and just what it was of the Clinton administration. And so things like the crime bill, all of that, like I had no, it was just, that's what it was. And so to become a teenager, and incarceration rates are what they are because of that. Like, you know, I think I'm bringing to the table an interest in, okay, as a millennial, what was happening either while I was too young to understand it or prior to me that shapes our current understanding. And just being a history buff, period, kind of. I mean, my dad was a, you know, kind of a history buff, and yeah, there's just something about the wanting to have more and more and more context for everything. And like you, also being drawn to, because my brother and sister are older than me, right. But also just me just having an affinity for wanting to know what the grown folks was talking about, you know?
Yeah.
And so always wanting to, you know, hoping they wouldn't like shoo me out of the room or make me go, you know, be somewhere else so that they could have their grown folks conversations. You know, it was, that was always something I was more drawn to, even more so than being around my peers.
Yeah.
So here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are. So we talked a little bit about our interests. Is there any more that we can discuss? I mean, being a history buff, you know, we both love documentaries. I think that's a huge piece. I think there's an element of storytelling in that kind of documentary fashion that we may bring to this. We'll see. I'm definitely interested in framing a lot of our conversations around an economic understanding too. I definitely want to critique capitalism in all its forms and how it informs why decisions were made, why things played out in the ways that they played out. In all of these
genres, in all of these worlds we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I actually, I mean, you know, not to ruin our whole thing, but I actually think it's such one of the huge lies that we don't acknowledge is that most of the decisions that have ended a lot of the things we care about are economic.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think, that's a whole...
If it's over, it's because there wasn't a financial incentive for it to continue.
Yeah.
At least not for, you know, the folks who had the most to gain.
Yeah, it's not the next wave of the Lord's movement. You know.
Yeah.
It's economic.
Yeah. So I'm definitely interested in that. I know we've touched a little bit on a feminist perspective, what that can be.
When we also bring like a huge connection to women's culture, women's music, the wonderful world of women's music, and you know how that really reshaped how we even approach music as an economy, and the position from which music is made. And so I think that's essential to also looking at our approach. Yeah,
because we definitely know how things could look. And I think that will be a piece of the show is talking about what an alternative modality could be. And then, of course, you know, there is the racial piece as well. I think, you know, it's no secret how white supremacy totally informs Christianity, period. And I think we'll have conversations both about, you know, things that are specific to the Black church, but also, you know, just things that have happened that do and don't have anything to, you know, Black Christians were just kind of brought along for the journey or used in some way, or maybe not, you know, but it did inform sermons, or it informed how lay members in the congregation understood phenomena, you know. So you talk a lot about, or we've talked a lot about what has to happen in order for people to be interested in having a greater conversation. And you put that in terms of the emotional work, or just the work, period. I know we talk about doing the work. Do you want to touch on any of that?
Well, I think we see many times, and I say we just as a collective we, I think we see leaving the church or believing something differently, or even something that related to history that we reevaluate. We compartmentalize these things and we detach them from ourselves. And so we'll do all this work to tidy up this particular area, and we don't recognize, it's also connected to our emotional selves. I think about how recognizing, for instance, white supremacy completely forced me not just to deal with the church it made me deal with my family. And so I think that people many times avoid doing that piece of the work because we have a really screwed up perception of what family means. Why can we not envision family differently? Why is this model of taking abuse from someone because they're older the only way we know how to contextualize?
No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah. And so, that's the only father you're ever, I heard that over and over and over. That's the only father you ever going to have. That's the only grandparents you ever going to have. Well, then fuck it. I'll be all right. And so we have to be willing to face that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that the answer is cutting somebody off or that the answer is, I'm not saying what the answer is, but I am saying you do have to be willing to say, am I willing to do this? What comes up for me if I think this is what I have to do? What do I not want to feel? What do I not want to think? What do I not want to sense or know about this person who's being abusive to me?
Yeah. And what are the standards, I think, in the context of abuse or in the context of just having healthy relationships, period, because, conflict happens and it's not necessarily abuse, but, what are the rules by which we are living by, so that we aren't being toxic or having, not growing. And so, to take it into, just the spiritual work that needs to happen or the mind work that needs to happen. It's thinking about or becoming privy to other possibilities, because I think for a lot of people, if they don't see it, they don't see what else could be. They don't see how different dynamics could be different. They don't see how community could be different. They don't see where they could get their knowledge or just get their entertainment from could be different. And so when you're locked into a particular way of taking in information, taking in just bullshit from other people on that level and not questioning it because it's all you know, then how do you even get to, maybe there's something that's better for me?
Well, and I think part of that emotional work is also, and you made this connection when we were talking about this before we started taping, is intellectual work. And so part of it also, and I say this to you all the time, I'm continually disappointed by how uninterested people are in anything outside of their bubble.
Yeah.
And so I think part of being able, maybe one of the blocks for people in being able to envision family differently, or being able to envision community differently, or being able to envision relationships differently, is because their interests are small.
Yeah.
In context with how big the world is. And so it limits their imagination.
Yeah.
And so being able to watch a show or read a book or about something you have no idea what it's about.
No, and especially read a book, because I think that's something that's going to have to come up a lot in our episodes. Are you reading?
Reading is fundamental.
Yeah.
It's fundamental. It's fundamental.
Fundamental. So I think that's really going to be the key. Like if people just aren't reading, and if they're not comprehending what they might be reading, that's a non-starter. So why now? Why are we doing this now?
Well, I think now is the moment for us to do this because we're finally not moving all over the place, because we moved a lot for 5 and a half years, ultimately. And so that's one reason. The other is I don't know who my community is anymore. And so, you know, at 45, I'm reaching an age where most of the people that I really learned from are dying.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I've been really working hard to do historical work to collect their stories and to, you know, have it so that it's documented. But in that, it's also like, okay, who are the people that really are thirsty for this? Who are the people that stand to benefit from their knowledge? And that's not my knowledge. That's their knowledge, you know, their stories and their lived experience and their ideologies that have then transferred to me. And so for me, that's why now, because there's just a lot to talk about. There's a lot. I'm watching like pieces of history being lopped off, stories being changed, you know, minute by minute. And younger people, bless them, who are sort of interested but weren't there, and God knows don't have the time to do all of the research involved in fully getting context and understanding. So there's these big sweeping narratives that get created, and I just go, no, wait, I was there. That's not what happened. And so I think now it's really important because people are looking back. And so to be able to add our voices to that, I think matters.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the selfish part of me is like, you know, I need to find the folks who are going to like want to be interested in my new music when it comes out. Like there's a piece of me that, you know, is, you know, selfishly seeking to do the audience building that I haven't been able to do, because honestly, the music has been only a fragment of my full identity. And so to be able to really pour into work that I feel like is 100%, yes, this is the positioning of the art, wanting that to land somewhere. So yeah, that's totally a selfish thing.
Well, I don't think it's, let me say this. I mean, I don't think it's selfish because the music is a gift. And, you know, everyone benefits. You know, you benefit from the standpoint of you get to share it and people get to hear it, but people benefit because they're pearls. You know, it's wisdom. There's experience in there, and every experience is distinct. And so I don't think that's selfish. You know?
All right.
I don't think that's selfish.
I think we've seen, or at least I've seen or heard, other podcasts or other just outlets for discussion, you know, video blogs or whatever. I feel like there are a lot of spaces for a lot of different cultural niches or just interests in things, or just general like history, let's debunk what the myths are type shows. And I feel like we really don't have an official or an unofficial platform where conversations are happening around the phenomena of evangelicalism or the Black church, or just how race and class and, you know, gender and sexuality and all of those things are informed by the Christianity of America. And so I feel like this is a very useful opportunity. It's a great opportunity for us, for anyone who's interested in those conversations. I think it's just a great, there's a lot of potential for it to fill that hole.
You know, I've been reading Interview with a Vampire, and there's this whole moment in the book I'm sure everybody's read it but me. I was too holy to read it when it came out. But I wanted to say that, you know, as I was reading the experience of Lewis and travels to Europe, and they're looking for others that are like them. And because they think they're the only people on the planet, you know, that are like themselves. And as I was reading it, I thought, that's exactly how I feel. I feel like, we've touched through so many different worlds, but we really don't have people.
Yeah.
We really don't have community. And so that's, to me, that's the real heartbeat of what we're doing and why we're doing it. It's like we want to hear from you. We want to communicate with you. We want to know your stories and your experiences and how you resonate or don't, with where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And to go back to what I was talking about, I do think there is, I think the opportunity really for us is to start kind of putting together, I guess, the beginnings of a record for this world. Because I feel like, gospel, but also like just how all of these things have informed how we got here. How the Black church has gotten here, how white evangelicalism has gotten here, all of those things. I think those, together, there isn't a ton of record setting, partially because the, church just isn't interested in looking that far back, but also because a lot of people are just kind of in it and aren't thinking about how we got here. I mean, there's, tons of people who still don't know why the Bible is what it is, how those books became. Yeah, like there's just no, so that's just like a very one specific example of the things that get left out of the general consciousness's understanding of things. And so I feel like this can be a great way. And I think the episodes will tie together in that kind of way and build on each other, even if they are topics that don't necessarily on the head relate to each other,
right,
but help to establish that record of, and then this, and if you put all that together, you get a clear vision of, that's why we're in the shit show that we're in.
Yeah.
What can people expect from this show?
Well, I hope what people glean from the show will be an enlightened, or enhanced, probably is a better word, view of either the world that they come from or the world that they're in, or a world they know nothing about.
But that does have some influence on their life.
Absolutely. Whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
And I think the interconnectedness of things is the other thing I'd really hope that people glean from the show. And, laugh. And we're gonna cut up a little bit. We didn't really show out a lot in this one.
We haven't. Well, this is really informational, and it's setting the stage. But I do hope that, a lot of the podcasts that bring me back every week or every 2 weeks or however frequently they post are the ones that make me feel connected and make me feel like there's this little slice of home or familial connection or friend connection. And I hope people get that. I hope our voices are soothing, and I hope the conversations resonate with them.
Yeah.
And I hope that there's a piece of it that in what we talk about from topic to topic that can stick with them and maybe help get them through these awful times that we're in.
Yeah. Well, I always say I was only prepared for the pandemic because I saw Rapture movies as a child. So I always knew it would happen one day.
Yeah. And I hope it does help us all find each other, as we've talked about a few times already. I hope that this, can be the start of some connection that happens outside of the podcast or because of the podcast, through the podcast, so that we can build on what we're sharing from day to day.
Agreed.
All right. So where can people find us? Tim, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm Tim Dillinger, Dillinger. And you can find me on Substack, godsmusicismylife.substack.com.
And you can find me at Ray Curenton on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That's RayCurenton. And be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. And be on the lookout for our next episode, which will be our first real conversation.
First real one.
Yeah. Until then.